Thank you, Greg. And Mike, I do have to thank you very much for two things. One, for inviting me to be on this panel with such a distinguished group of colleagues, which I very challenging and stimulating. I very much appreciate that. And two, for inviting me to be here in one of my favorite cities outside of Calgary, Vancouver. The last time I was here during the Olympics, and for all of the Vancouverites who are here who put on such a great show, let me just say congratulations and thank you. I had a fantastic time, and I just can't believe what a great show you did. So thank you so much for what you did on the Olympics. I must admit, it's hard coming back and not seeing it's on. I didn't know how I'd feel. It is a bit nostalgic. So I walked down to the flame, even though it was out, and walked back again, and it was just a bit different, but good to see it still there. Now, Mike, the other challenge Mike gave me, though, was that he said, Steve, I'd like the panelists to talk about everything about the energy sector they know and do it in 10 minutes. I probably only know 10 minutes worth of stuff, but it is still hard to do that topic in 10 minutes. So I'm going to focus on 2 points today. First, express a concern that I have that perhaps some of the overall approach to dealing with climate change that we're doing is getting a bit off the mark. And second, let me make a case that electricity, and not necessarily the oil and gas sector, will be the most impacted, as will our customers. So why do I think it's a bit off the mark? I think many policymakers, and I think pretty well all of the special interest groups, are maybe making a classic problem-solving mistake. And that is when you identify a big problem, and the first thing you do is jump right into micro-level solutions. And certainly, in my experience in business, when you do that, that leads to serious damage to the business and to careers. So let's put that in perspective. So you've got a company, the profits are dropping, you jump in and say, I've got to cut costs, let's get out of here, let's get down. Right across the line, you start a massive cost-cutting program. But if you really stood back and said, what is the problem? You will find out the problem was actually dropping revenues. The reason revenues were dropping was because your competitors were out servicing your customers, and what you really had to do was invest money in customer service to get the revenues up to make more money. And I see elements of that in the climate change debate. When we get responses like, shut down the oil sands, kill coal, change all the world's light bulbs, everyone ride a bike, I do suggest it's time that we may perhaps all step back a bit, look at this more realistically and with a bit more common sense. And by that I mean, and I think you've heard that expressed by my fellow speakers, first of all, I do believe this is a 50-year issue. It's not a 2-year issue. We have time. I think that's a blessing. It's not a problem. It provides much more scope to look at alternate solutions, to be more creative, and hopefully not so destructive. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mean that we shouldn't start now. We should. What I'm saying is, let's not get on a wrong path too early. It could be quite serious. Second point I'd make is, the reality is, and you've heard this mentioned, oil and gas and electricity will be here in 40 years, and they're still going to be used in large quantities. That's just being realistic. I would submit that technology is the source of the problem and has to change. And if I could paraphrase a very famous phrase, it is the technology stupid. And that's going to take time. We have time. It does need massive investment because the risks are high. But the risks are high whether we do it, and they're also high if we don't do it. But because of that risk factor, I do think we will need public-private partnerships to get that technology over the goal line. And another one of these throwaways is that carbon will cost a fortune. Well, if you start there, you immediately cut off a stream of potential solutions. And we need every solution possible, not fewer solutions. So I don't think we should start there. Now, my second point, I'll focus on the electricity sector. Now, you can tell from our panel, and Mike mentioned this, the general norm when one talks about energy is to think of it in terms of oil and gas. And my own experience is that electricity has sort of been an afterthought to that whole process. But look at today. if we look around where technology breakthroughs are taking place and where there are exciting futuristic scenarios being bandied about by people on the street, it's in the electricity sector. Wind power, wave power, geothermal power, solar power, biomass power. There's a new source of electricity generation coming out at unprecedented speed. None of the ones I just mentioned were more than mere thoughts or of any significance 5 or 10 years ago. How about scenarios like consumer home generation, smart grids, smart metering, every car an electric car? How about emerging technologies like wireless transmission electricity, mini nuclear plants, low-cost storage electricity? These and many more are emerging in our industry. But of course, it hasn't always been that way. For over 100 years, this industry deserved to be on the back burner. A new technology emerged every 40 or 50 years. And that's why almost all of the electricity produced in the world today comes from plants that were built in the 70s and 80s or even earlier. And now all that's changing. And it's happening to an industry, quite frankly, that is not used to change. It is operated regionally, generally not in competitive markets, generally operates on technologies that are 25 to 40 years old, and it transports it on a transmission system that I think almost everyone agrees is too old and antiquated to be a platform for change. Yet, what we see today are huge, powerful external forces at work which collectively have the potential to totally upset the electricity apple cart. And I don't think that's necessarily good for consumers. So welcome to my world. As I stand here today, I can see a world in 2050 for electricity that is very, very good. I can see one where there is youth growth for the need for electricity, and it will ultimately replace much of the energy source that oil and gas supplies today. I can see it being emission-free. I can see it being stored. I can see it being generated locally. And I can see it being low cost and reliable. I believe that is a realistic scenario for 2050. Technology can get us there. But two big questions come to mind. First, can our industry handle all this technological change without disrupting supply? Now remember, we have to supply power 7/24 and 99.9999% of the time. Not 99.99, not 98, 99.9999% of the time. There's no room for error when it comes to power. Second, we've got to get from 2010 to 2050. And I know that whatever steel I put in the ground today will probably still be producing power in 2050. So the more steel I put today, the less innovative are my solutions, and the further out becomes my vision for 2050. And we got to do all of that against a framework of huge uncertainty. I won't comment on that. I think my fellow speakers have mentioned that in many, many cases. It certainly exists in the energy sector today. I also know that today every renewable source of energy is subsidized. And that causes me two major problems. First, it creates expectations for consumers that these low-emission fuels are just as reliable and as low cost as existing generation. They are not. And second, I know the subsidies can't last. They will become prohibitively expensive for any government. So let me just try to frame that for you. You may have heard some of these stats before, but if you look at the power costs from legacy existing coal, nuclear, large-scale hydro plants across Canada and the US, those costs are roughly, let's say, $10 to $50 a megawatt hour range. A new coal plant today, without CCS or any of those other costs, just a brand new coal plant, that cost would be over 70. Wind is over 80. Large-scale hydro, 100, maybe as much as 150. Geothermal, 100 to 125. New nuclear, 125, 150. Solar in Canada, 400. In the US, maybe 200. And wave power, well, it's off the chart, right? No one wants to even talk about it. So against that backdrop of realities, I think the following public policies would certainly make sense to me. One, accept the science that says we do have some time to act. Be realistic that we can accomplish a lot, both right now, but also by 2040, and that ultimately we can cause a huge bit of damage by doing something stupid in the next 5 years. Let's start easing off subsidies for renewables, ensure those costs are averaged directly into consumers' energy bills and not subsidized by general government revenues. Let's support technology development, particularly where Canada has natural competitive advantages. Let's use accelerated infrastructure replacement to help the process in the early years. Let's support smart metering for consumers. Let's support transmission upgrades and expand the regional interconnects, not only east-west, but particularly north-south. I think both the economics and physics of electricity do not lend themselves to rapid, ill-planned changes. But we can do a lot more. We can do it a lot faster than we've done in the past. But without direction and constantly bouncing back and forth along the road is not helpful. We do need to move down that road steadily and smartly and towards tough long-term goals and realistic short-term goals. And for electricity, I can assure you that the tortoise will beat the hare every time. The essential service is too critical to take the chance of trying to race down that road. So I don't see a big buying answer. I see a lot of small things with steady progress. I think we can make tremendous advances over the next 20 years, fantastic over 40. Let's not carry it away in the next 1 or 2. But I can tell you I do see a light at the end of the tunnel for our industry, and I do not think that it is a train coming at us. Thank you.